Inside the Huddle with Sky Sports, Neil Reynolds and Jeff Reinebold.
Yes, hello, welcome to Inside the Huddle, where we're going to look back on Week 17 in the NFL, which stretched quite a way back, all the way back to Christmas Day, with the games played then, and of course there were games on Saturday, and then games last night on Sunday. So joining me to break it all down before he hops on a plane back to Hawaii is Jeff Reinebold. And Jeff, the NFL spread the love this week, putting the games all across the Christmas period.
And we had great football and some not so great football all the way through the holiday season. But, you know, Neil, it was great. It was great fun to watch. I mean, really some incredible performances, some great games, and, you know, a lot of stuff that we can chop up, certainly.
Yeah, let's dig into it then. We're going to go kind of in reverse order with some of this stuff. So most recent first, which would mean the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to discuss them. Staying on track for that number one seed, Jeff. They're on a collision course now with the Detroit Lions. The winner of that game, which will be played on Sunday Night Football in Week 18. We're more on that a little bit later. The winner of that game will get the number one seed in the NFC and the NFC North title. The loser will drop down to number 5 in the rankings in the NFC. So that's a huge game next week. Sam Darnold in a 27-25 win over the Green Bay Packers. 377 yards and 3 touchdowns, Jeff. He just keeps rolling.
Tremendous performance. And I mean, you know, gutty. He got hit a lot. He stood in the pocket. He made throws. He got out of the pocket and made throws. There were a couple he'd certainly love to have back, you know, and he, you know, he, even by his own admission, the last one, the clincher, the one that was a little naked play that was what his running back had to make a play for him. But, you know, it's just so much fun for me, and I'm sure for a lot of the viewers, that to watch a guy who really his career was on the brink and how far he has come. And it gives hope to all those guys that are out there right now kind of struggling, in oblivion. And, you know, here's a guy Carolina gave up on. He had to go to San Francisco and sit and watch behind a guy who was drafted. He's the first player picked in the draft, and watching a guy who's the last player picked in the draft succeed in front of him. But, you know, we were talking last night on the set, Neil. I think it's so refreshing how he took the coaching, how he wasn't embittered by the situation. He wanted to learn. He wanted to get better. He never gave up on himself.
I saw a picture this morning on the social media, Jeff. 2 years ago, there's a picture of Sam Darnold standing next to Baker Mayfield, both in Carolina Panthers uniforms. We'll get to Baker in a second because he's a game away from making the playoffs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yet again. It just goes to show how quickly it can change in the NFL. Another familiar face in a new place this year was Saquon Barkley, who has joined the 2,000-yard rushing club. Barkley now stands 101 yards away from breaking Eric Dickerson's all-time single-season rushing record. So Barkley's got 2,005 yards. He got to that point with a 41-7 win over the Dallas Cowboys, which clinched the NFC East. And now he needs 101 against his old team, the Giants, in Week 18. Jeff, this was probably the biggest story in what turned into a bit of a romp, wasn't it?
Neil, every time at the end of the game, they're up by, 25 points, whatever it was. And the game's been decided. And every time he would come around the edge and get to the sideline and somebody would tackle him on the sidelines, my heart would go in my throat.
You wanted him out there.
I mean, the record is a huge thing, and that's shared. You know, Phoebe made a great point last night about how that's shared amongst everybody on the team, and the offensive linemen and defense, and Jeff Stoutland, the O-line coach, and you could see just how much it meant to everybody as he was getting closer and closer to the record. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm Sirianni on the sideline. I'm going, that's my meal ticket, bro. This might be the only Super Bowl I'll ever have a chance to win again, right? He's been there, didn't get it done, and here's his guy, and you're putting him at risk, and it is at risk because you never know. I mean, and so hats off to the Eagles, man. it was impressive. It was an impressive win. They dominated the Cowboys.
They have to get healthy, though. They have to get healthy with Jalen Hurts, who missed this game. Kenny Pickett goes out with a rib injury. So they're down to Tanner McKee at quarterback. He threw a couple of nice touchdown passes to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but this was one-sided as can be. I guess the counter to your point, and you're right, Jeff, I think we worry so much about these injuries. It's why there's a reason why players don't play in the preseason, because they're meaningless. This, from a wins and losses, getting to the Super Bowl stage for the Eagles in Week 18 is meaningless. My counter, I guess, is what? How much of a boost? I was going to say it gives the team a real boost, but for how long?
Well, I think, that's the question. You get that. It's like that. You get that immediate adrenaline rush, but then you got to recognize that as soon as that game's over, you're on to the playoffs, and now you're in single elimination football, and everything intensifies, everything magnifies, everything's more important. All the decisions you make are more critical. Every step in your preparation becomes more one and done. I mean, it's about being 1-0 every week, and that's so cliche, but it's so true. And you've got to be able to say that was a nice thing to be a part of. But right now, it's, whomever it is, Tampa Bay or whoever you get, Atlanta, whoever you get in that first round.
Let's move on to the Bucs, who have put that the NFC South is going to go down to the wire. We'll talk about Atlanta a little bit later because that's going to go in our any other business section with their game against the Washington Commanders. But Tampa Bay now stand one game away from clinching a fourth straight NFC South title. And they'll be playing the New Orleans Saints in Week 18. The reason they're one game away is they beat the Carolina Panthers 48-14. Jeff, Baker Mayfield, 27 of 32, 359 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had as many touchdown passes as incompletions.
And, and Sam Darnold is the story of the year at quarterback. But certainly Baker Mayfield, he deserves certainly a tremendous amount of admiration for what he's been able to accomplish as he replaced a legend in Tampa Bay. And we were talking about this the other day. You don't want to be the guy after the guy. And I mean, that's what you you don't want to have to stand in there. Tom Brady is a long shadow to stand under, right? And but Baker, he doesn't seem to, none of that phases him. He just seems to be out there like a kid in the schoolyard, just chunking it around and having fun with his mates. And his connection with Evans is almost uncanny once they get in the red zone. I mean, you can double Evans. He finds a way to uncover, and Baker is whistling darts, right? Every time he's down there.
Yeah. What was impressive about the Bucs, Jeff, and again, this is against the Carolina team that's heading towards another ultimately disappointing season, even though there's been some signs of life from Bryce Young. What's impressive is the Bucs have balance now. Bucky Irving was over 100 yards rushing again, and they rushed for 202 yards on the night.
That is, I think, going to be so critical to how far they go in the playoffs. They're in a position, I think, where you look at a team and you say, number one, can you run the football? Right now, with those two backs now, and it's a 1-2 punch. They're not relying on one guy. They have the ability to run the football. They've proven that over time. Baker's going to be Baker. He's going to sling it around and he's going to make plays and in and out of the pocket. Defensively, Todd Bowles will always have them prepared and they'll always be in the fight. So Tampa, particularly when they're in Tampa, is they're going to be a tough out. And how they finish if they indeed do win, the division is going to be critical. And they're a team that I certainly would not want to play because when Baker gets hot, when he's on a heater, watch out now.
Well, yeah, last year the Bucs took down the Eagles in the playoffs. They gave Detroit all they could handle in Ford Field. So they are a dangerous team. Let's go back to Saturday night then, where the Well, the Bengals stayed alive in the most dramatic fashion. Now, they still need a lot, but what they did, Jeff, as well, with the 30-24 overtime win was delay Denver taking the final spot in the AFC. So now the situation for Cincinnati, Cincinnati need to beat Pittsburgh. They need to have Denver lose to Kansas City, and they need to have Miami lose at the New York Jets. So it's still a lot for the Bengals to do, but let's just revel in a bit of Joe Burrow greatness again.
Exactly. I mean, think about the game. You know, Joe Burrow had to overcome, you know, now they play. I give them credit. They played pretty well on defense early in the game, but then they went through a lull on defense. So he had to overcome the defense. He had to come back and make plays at the end that he probably shouldn't have had to make. He had to overcome poor clock management by his head coach. He had to overcome poor kicking by a kicker who doinks one off the post when they got a chance to win it. And he had to overcome the fact that his number one receiver, the guy that I think is the best receiver in football, doesn't have a good game. He has 3 drops. Jamar Chase has 3 drops in the game. And still, with all of that, losing a running back before you go to overtime, with all of that, he finds a way to get his team across the line. And that's the bottom line of the bottom line, Neil.
Yeah, 412 yards, 3 touchdown passes, all to T. Higgins. He was sacked 7 times, Jeff. So to your point, he kind of ran off afterwards. I mean, he looked wrung out. He looked exhausted after his post-match interview. And he ran up and he's doing the ice in the veins thing. And absolutely that's what he is. And look, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. I don't. Do you want to watch Tyler Huntley sub in for Tua in the playoffs? I don't know. I'd love to see Joe Burrow in there. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Denver probably take care of business, but you could see why the rest of the AFC field want nothing to do with the Bengals. Now they're flawed, as you say, but he gives them a chance every single snap.
And there is no better advertisement or validation of what we say continuously is that the number one position in this game is quarterback. And when you have elite quarterback play, which he brings to Cincinnati, you have a chance. Because if you look at that team, and you're exactly correct, they are a flawed football team. Their running back is a good player. He's not a great player. He's not a dominant player. They've got, yes, they do have T. Higgins. Yes, they do have Jamar Chase. Yes, they do have an emerging player in Yasovich. But outside of that, they're just pretty average.
What do you make of Zach Taylor at the end of regulation? There's like 1 minute 29 left. They've obviously instructed Chase Brown to slide at the 1, not score, not give that football back. What did Denver have? 1 timeout left because he got hurt. So they got given back the timeout. Brown got hurt. But even then, the Bengals could have taken knees a few times, Jeff, and kicked a field goal and maybe left, 20 or 30 seconds on the clock?
Well, I think if you got 2 choices as we talk about this. Number one is be critical. Critique it and recognize that there were a number of things that didn't go right or weren't managed right by Cincinnati. And you can learn from that if you're Cincinnati and if you're teams all over football, because that series of plays will be something that good coaches will study in the offseason and actually practice. First thing that happens when Brown goes down, right? In that situation, what he should have done instead of going down and stopping the clock, because again, remember Denver took a timeout and then were given their timeout back because Brown didn't get up. Just get up and stand there, right?
Yeah, then they'll call their timeout.
Yeah, and then they'll call their timeout, and now you can come off the field, right? And there's no stoppage of play because of an injured player. That's the first mistake they made. Then, as you said, they could have just kneeled or sneaked or whatever they wanted to do to force Denver to take more timeouts or waste time off the clock. And so again, then you go to the situation where they're out there and Knicks, who can run around, right? They're what we call over rushing the quarterback. Hendrickson is way up high past him, and he's stepping up, sliding up in the pocket, where the only play he's got, he's got to go 80 yards with the football. The only play he's got is slide up in the pocket and deliver. You want to push him back and make him work back to his own goal line, right?
Right.
Keep him in front. So they didn't cage the quarterback very well in that situation. And so there's a lot of stuff in there for teams to study about how to handle those critical moments better.
Yeah, and yet they opened the door for Bo Nix to throw the game-tying touchdown with 8 seconds left. Nix was red hot in the second half, and then just couldn't get going again in overtime. That's why Burrow was the one who took this game. But we're going to see Denver play for a place in the playoffs on Sunday night next weekend. But Jeff, they're in good hands, aren't they, with this young quarterback?
I think the future is really, really bright. And you know what's really interesting is as you watch the interaction on the sideline between he and Sean Payton. Now, Sean Payton is let me put it this way. He's a very strong personality. And you know from having been around him and interviewed him. And this young quarterback who's a raw rookie in the NFL, he will bite back at him a little bit on the sidelines. And Peyton takes it because I think it's almost like Peyton knows that this is his guy. This is his hand-selected guy. And I think he's really proud of him. It's like, when your son talks back to you a little bit, not talks back to you, but when your son sticks his feet in the ground for the first time and says, "No, Dad, I really think this," it might take you back a little bit, but you go, he's growing up. He's starting to become a man.
That's what I think. That's what we're seeing with Denver. Certainly, they're in good hands there. Let's move on to the other game earlier on Saturday night. I'm blanking, Jeff. Chargers. It's been a busy weekend, but I should know the teams. The Los Angeles Chargers booked their place in the AFC playoffs. A 40-7 win over the Patriots. This was never in doubt. What was on display was the continued brilliance of Justin Herbert, who now becomes the most prolific passing yard quarterback in NFL history in his first 5 seasons, passing Peyton Manning. He was very, very good from start to finish, wasn't he?
Very good, very efficient, very much wasn't flashy, but delivered the ball where it had to be, when it had to be there, kept it away from the defense. He throws 3 touchdown passes. I think it gives him 21 for the season, Neil, and against 3 interceptions. I mean, that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. We say all the time, if you can be 3 for 1, that's a good touchdown to interception ratio. He's got 21 and he's got 3 interceptions. That's incredible. Think about this one. And I as I was thinking about Herbert when we watched him play, and then watching Baker, and then again recognizing what Burrow's done and the greatness that we all know is Patrick Mahomes, and the way that they're playing in Detroit, and the quarterback play. We talk about the great ones, and the first guy you go to is Mahomes, and you should, right? Because he is that good. And Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. But hey, wait a second now. Look at the play we're getting out of some other guys that don't get that kind of marquee, I guess we don't handle them as marquee quarterbacks.
Right.
And maybe we should.
Yeah, I think because that team's not appeared in our playoff lives as much as some of those others. He's not a big talker, but then neither is Lamar. So, none of those quarterbacks you talk about are really putting themselves out there overly. But I think you're right. I think we should pay much more attention to Justin Herbert, which we don't seem to do. We do pay attention to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, though. Let's go back to Christmas Day, where they clinched the number 1 seed in the AFC. They moved to a franchise best 15-1 record. I mean, on reflection, when you sit here now and just say the Chiefs are chasing a three-peat, they're going to get everyone's best game. Before we dig into this game, a 29-10 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're sitting here at 15-1, Jeff. They're even better than they've been in their great years in terms of wins and losses.
No question. And, you make the best point when you say they get everybody's best game. Everybody circles the Chiefs game because that's a game that you win. It puts you in a different stratosphere in terms of your perception around the league. Well, they beat the Chiefs. Well, you beat the Chiefs. That means something. And we saw that last year. Remember when the Raiders came in late in the year? I think it might have even been Christmas Day, and
It was
and they
Christmas Day.
they beat the Chiefs, and it was like, oh, watch out for the Raiders now. They beat the Chiefs. All right,
Probably
well,
gave them.
the Raiders come back this year, and they're the Raiders again, right? That was a short-lived, dalliance with greatness, but
Yeah.
that's where you measure yourself against when you play the elite teams. And I know you said this on other podcasts, Neil, and I know you said it on the broadcast, and I think it's worth saying again, is they have become this generation's New England Patriots.
Yeah. And because of the way they've had to take everyone's best game, the way they win it and then hit reset and then win it, and then they come back and now all they want to do is win it again. It's like they've never won it. And you can say, well, okay, there aren't that many repeat champions. Go through the history books. There are dynasties that have happened, and there are repeat champions in certain places. But I mean, that's just why it was them and the 49ers in the late 80s chasing a threepeat, into 1990. This stuff doesn't happen what they're doing, and so it's like very Patriots like. It's like the Steelers of the 70s, the 49ers of the 80s, the Cowboys of the 90s. It's historic. They are in that moment. Now they may have to, as we've talked about before, they may have to do that mid-run rebuild at some point. Travis Kelce's not going to be there forever. They'll move on with new people around Patrick Mahomes, but he'll be there. Andy Reid's going to stay there, I would assume, for why would he move on? He's got Patrick Mahomes. So this can continue for quite some time, even with their flaws, and they have flaws. But this game, Jeff, they had a couple of turnovers created again on defense. Mahomes goes over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So there's your worry if you're the rest of the NFL, because that might have been Mahomes' best game.
Yeah, and when you talk about greatness over time, Neil, it's hard to describe to the listener or viewer just how difficult that is because of all the things that detract from you or try and pull greatness away from you. Number one, everybody wants to get paid, right? Because they all stand in line because they think it's their agent saying, well, it's because of my guy, right? So it's hard to keep your roster together. When we've seen the Chiefs lose guys and somehow they're resilient, whether it's by injury or, big contracts like when Hill goes to Miami, and they just overcome it. And it's hard to keep a team together. It's hard to stay healthy. It's hard to stay hungry where, Andy Reid, what more does Andy Reid need to do? Right? He's going in the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Fame football coach. And to the fire that it takes and the grind that is the NFL season, the off season, the draft, all of the stuff, he's a 70-year-old guy, right? And he's got energy to go through that meat grinder that is the NFL. It's not a young man's game for the players or the coaches. And this, Spags is pushing 70, Dave Tobe's pushing 70. That's an old staff. And so how do those guys maintain that competitiveness, that competitive edge through all of that? It's a phenomenal thing. The league's not built like that.
No,
They're an outlier. They are truly an outlier.
Which is why they lift that Lombardi, certainly the last 2 years. Let's move on. The other Christmas Day game, the Baltimore Ravens, they just were in total control against the Houston Texans, 31-2. It was the usual suspects for the Ravens in Lamar Jackson, a one run where he reached 21.25 miles per hour and then said he was jogging for the touchdown. It was the fastest run he's ever had in his career. He became the most successful rushing quarterback of all time, but he also threw an incredible touchdown pass to Isaiah Likely, Jeff, where he kept the play alive. I mean, we saw the best of Lamar again.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And here again, so Lamar does what Lamar does. And we have become so conditioned to his greatness that it's just like another day, right? And you think about a guy that has maybe his best year in his career. You could argue that.
Yeah.
In Derrick Henry, and we don't even talk about him. He got 17, almost 1,800 yards. Right?
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for Lamar and if it wasn't for Saquon Barkley, we'd be lording over Derrick Henry right now.
Absolutely. And it's like, oh, yeah, and Derrick Henry's pretty good too.
Jeff, I just want to touch on the Texans here because they have been in a bit of a slide. The last two over the Christmas period, the Chiefs, they gave them a good run and then they fell away late in that game, Houston. This one, they just never showed up. They're the 4th seed, and regardless of what happened on December the 21st and Christmas Day, they were likely to be the 4th seed anyway. Was that a factor in the back of their minds, or are you concerned about this team?
I'm truly concerned. And if I was a Texans fan, I would be concerned because here's what I see with the Texans. They got some nice pieces. They got some nice playthings, right? I mean, Nico Collins, great player. Obviously, it hurts to lose Tank Dell, but John Mechie's a good player. Schultz is a good player. Joe Mixon's a good player. CJ Stroud's a good player. They got good players, but you know where they not very good, where you have to be good in the playoffs, and that's up front. And it's starting to show where Joe Mixon, as good a back as Joe Mixon is, his production is now started to drop off in the run game. And that's put too much on a young quarterback who's getting hit way more than he should get hit. And, the same thing can be true. You said could be true about their defense because, yes, they are good on the edges, right? I mean, they've got 2 really good edge rushers, but you can run the ball on them. And their linebackers are good players, not great players. Secondary's got players. But your weaknesses at this time of year, when you get to playoff football, because everybody's good, right? Your weaknesses get multiplied. And right now, Bobby Slowick's got to find some answers to juice up that offense again because they're not playing well offensively right now. The quarterback's struggling like crazy. And as bizarre as this sounds, DeMeco is getting criticized openly in the Houston market and the Houston press. And I'm thinking to myself, come on now, fellas. This is a team that was dead 2 years ago when he took the job. And he's got them to the playoffs 2 years in a row.
They had 11 wins in the previous 3 seasons, and now he's delivered back-to-back division titles. So they are much improved. This is not some Village Hall committee meeting, Jeff, but we're going to have an any other business section just to tidy up everything else. Been going on around the NFL in week 17. The Washington Commanders got themselves into the playoff with a 30-24 win over the Atlanta Falcons. And this was and we just talked about Lamar Jackson. Here's the younger version, the newer version of Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels. He throws for 227 yards, 3 touchdowns, including the game winner to Zach Ertz in overtime. And he had the 127 rushing yards as well. So, I mean, this I'm going to say kid, but he's not because he plays like he's 34, not 24. I mean, this player here is just everything you would hope for when you're looking for a franchise quarterback. Now, we said the same sort of thing about CJ Stroud last year. So there can be bumps in the road. There will be ups and downs, bumps and peaks and valleys and all of that. But they look set at quarterback position now with Jaden Daniels.
Boy, and what a way to start building your team. Huh? I mean, if you're Dan Quinn, he looks like an absolute genius going out and getting a 13-year veteran in Bobby Wagner to be his voice in the locker room, bringing in, 4 really good players from the Cowboys who he knew personally and they knew him, drafting Jaden Daniels, finding guys, on the street that, have turned out to be, like you were talking about Crowder. I mean, Crowder, I didn't even know Crowder was still playing. And all of a sudden he's catching touchdown passes. I mean, it's Zach Ertz, a guy that, Philadelphia had enough of. And, so they'll continue to get better. I thought what was really interesting, because after our show, I came back and I was watching the game. When he got sacked one time, the Barton, I think it was, the linebacker from ran through and got him from the Falcons and bent him over kind of. Really a nasty looking. And I thought, and you could hear the air went out of the stadium.
Yeah, I
So
thought that was an
every
RG3 moment.
Yeah, I did too. And everybody in that stadium held their breath until he got up and went to the next play because
Yeah.
they know exactly what that kid means to that franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. In the any other business section that I've just created, that win by Washington uh, gave the Los Angeles Rams the NFC West because the Rams had beaten the Cardinals on Saturday night, 13-9. Another defensive showing. So since they beat the Bills and scored 44 points, they've scored 19, 12, and 13 and won all three of those games. By winning that game, the Rams then needed 3 wins out of 5 different scenarios, and they got them. They got Minnesota winning, they got Buffalo winning, they got Washington winning. So the Rams clinched the West. Again, who would have put money on that at the start of the season, given where the 49ers had just come from being in the Super Bowl? And they've won 9 of their last 11, Jeff.
You know what? It's so refreshing. And there's a lot of reasons to love Sean McVay. But when they interviewed him and they asked him, would he be watching, the other games that had, the implications of the other games, you could only do what you can do. Right? So instead of giving us that coach speak, well, I'll be preparing for our next game because that's all we got control of and all that kind of stuff, which is true. But you're a human being and you recognize that there are other factors. So you're going to watch. And he admitted that, which I thought was really refreshing. But think about this. There's another team right there, Neil. You talk about Cincinnati, if they can find a way to climb into this thing. Denver, with that defense that they play and the way Bo Nix is playing, put the Rams down and the Bucks down as teams that you don't want to see come playoff time.
Yeah, these playoff fields are going to run deep with quality teams. We got one more week of the regular season to go. Just pick out a couple of games. We'll get into this on Thursday with myself and Phoebe to look out for. But there's a few scenarios that are very simple. Baltimore and Cleveland meet on Saturday night, and that's a 9:30 kickoff in the UK. If Baltimore win that, then they take the AFC North title. Later that night, the Bengals play the Steelers, so the Bengals will be looking to win to keep their little dream alive. Of course, it's not a little dream, excuse me. It's a very big dream, but the chances are small still right now for Cincinnati. Then going on to Sunday, you've got the Bucks game against the Saints in the 6 p.m. slot. The Bucks win that, then they very simply take the NFC South for the 4th time in a row. At 9:25, Denver and Kansas City will play. Simple for Denver. Kansas City may rest Patrick Mahomes. They may rest some key starters. And Denver can get there into the playoffs with a win. And of course, Sunday Night Football is going to be Detroit and Minnesota in Detroit for the number 1 seed in the NFC. Player of the week, I'm going to go with. We'll do our players and coach of the week. On player of the week, I'm going to go with Sam Darnold. Jeff, 377 yards, 3 touchdowns. We said everything that needs to be said about him. He continues to back up this brilliant story. So credit to him. And the Vikings are 1 game from being the number 1 seed. Who is your coach of the week to wrap us
All
up?
right, I'm going to go with a guy that we both know very well, and I'm a big fan of. And his defense last week, doggone near pitched a shutout, and it's hard to hold somebody to 3 points in the National Football League. But Adam Dirty, the defensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, what a great defensive performance by Adam's group. First-year coordinator in the NFL, and he's got his defense humming at the most critical time.
Yeah, they just missed out on the playoffs because of what happened with the Rams and all the other results that went their way. But that's a pretty good season moving on from Pete Carroll for the Seattle Seahawks, going from Pete Carroll to Mike McDonald as head coach.
No question. And again, you can control, and here I go with the coach speak again, but you can only control what you can control. And that's why I think what Adam did, and you watch how their defense got better. And their defense kept them in games when, at the end, the offense was struggling a little bit. And all you can do is do your job. And he did a phenomenal job in that game. And they were still fighting for their playoff lives at that moment. So, congratulations to him. And that's, I'm sure, the start of very many good defensive performances in Seattle.
Yeah, very proud to see Adam flying the flag for British coaches, doing his job. I think he'll be a head coach one day. I really do. I think he's on the path. So, yeah, good to see that. We are out of time now on Inside the Huddle for this episode and for this year. So me and Phoebe will be back on Thursday to preview Week 18. Jeff, I'm sure both want to say Happy New Year to our listeners and viewers. We always appreciate, don't we, how much people give us the opportunity to talk about what we love.
It's the best job going, and and again, I want to publicly say thank you to you and Jay Bell and Phoebe and Jacko and everybody that is a part of not only this but also the part of the show. It's always been a blast to do it, and it's onward to the Super Bowl, baby. Let's go.
Hey, keep rolling, Jeff. You'll just be back in Hawaii doing it. We're dipping your toes in the sand and in the surf, so that's good for you. Yes, thank you everyone for joining us on Inside the Huddle today and all season long. I'll be back with Phoebe on Thursday. All that remains is to wish you all a very happy new year. And Jeff, say goodbye to the folks.
Aloha.